Greetings and salutations, friends. Welcome to Pastors of Payne. We're here in Payne County, Oklahoma. I know many of you are not. Some of you are not. Many of you are right here in good old Payne County. And that's like our primary audience. When we started this show, we were like, oh, we want to talk to our people in between Sundays. How do we do that? And then what's been great is people from other places have kind of joined in. You know, listening from other places, even other countries. Welcome to Payne County, Stillwater, Oklahoma. I'm Father Brian O'Brien, pastor of St. Francis Xavier. So usually Father Kerry Wakulich is here, but he's on sabbatical, but he's going to be back soon. It's coming. It's his little jaunt around the world, Ireland. Where's Medjugorje? Is
Croatia.
Croatia, yes. And then up and down the East Coast. Anyway, Father Kerry will be back soon, and so he'll be more regular here on the show. Coming soon to a Catholic Student Center near you. But I'm joined today by Father Robert Healey for the second week in a row.
That's an honor.
Man, last week we were talking about this effort here in our parish, St. Francis Xavier, and I know Father Kerry would agree, to reclaiming Sundays. And I have to admit, I am very personally challenged by this whole thing. Now, I mean, it's an initiative that I'm leading at the same time that I'm being very challenged by because I think sort of growing up, in my life, even as a priest, I must say, there have been times when, like, I've treated Sundays like, obviously there's, I have Mass, but for a long time, my 11 years of my 16 years as a priest were in and around Bishop Kelly High School, where I was not in sort of the rhythm of a parish. Mm-hmm. I was in the rhythm of a high school administrator. And so I always had Mass somewhere. I always celebrated Mass. Every day I celebrate Mass. Mm-hmm. But treated, at times. And so this challenge, this challenge is not something we're just sort of putting on other people and expecting you to just automatically become like us. This is something I would say just internally that's hard. So what I want to talk about today, and I think Father Healey, again, has beautiful wisdom on the subject of leisure. This is not something that comes naturally to me. Mm-hmm. I would say one of the things that Father Healey, in being here over the last year plus now, and kind of working through as we work together, I think one of the things he would say about me is like, I do and I value, and this is not a bad thing, like I value productivity. I value, getting stuff done, and like moving the parish forward and getting all, having all my emails answered and, kind of what's next and what are we doing?
And I've been learning a lot.
And that's a good thing.
From the virtues that are involved in that. The diligence and the attentiveness to detail and.
Yeah, and moving the parish forward and getting stuff done, and what are we doing?
Keeping tabs with people. Yeah,
and there's a value to that, and I would say one of the biggest influences in my own life. And I read as a brand new priest, I read a book called "Getting Things Done." The subtitle it's called "Getting Things Done: The Art of Stress-Free Productivity," by a guy named David Allen. And what I was looking at as a young priest was, gosh, man, there's a lot going on. At that time I was at Christ the King. I was chaplain at Bishop Kelly. And I started to kind of know, Bishop Slattery was sort of hinting at, oh man, you're going to take over Bishop Kelly High School. And I was like, crud, like how am I going to get all that? How am I going to kind of do all this and get everything done in the course of a day? So I looked for sort of tips on productivity. But I also, so that's been a good thing. The downside of that is this mentality that I always have to be doing something. And I think one of the beautiful things that Father Healey's brought to my life and to the life of our parish is that that's not true, right? So there is a place for getting stuff done, productivity, answering emails. In the life of a parish priest, I mean, we have a lot of people that we have to kind of keep track of and take care of, and phone calls to be returned and emails. But the other piece of that is that we're not called to constantly be on the move, to constantly be busy, that there's a place, a beautiful place for leisure.
And things have a purpose, but the purpose isn't just to have more, another purpose
more
beyond
stuff.
that. And that's
more stuff. So I think, in my own life, I've tried to, just in sort of stuff that I own, I try to be I don't have a lot of stuff, I try not to sort of keep a lot of stuff around. And part of that is being a priest. We're going to be on the move. You got to be able to sort of pack up and move when the bishop calls. But the other piece of that, and this has been incredibly challenging, what I want to talk through today is, what does it look like to just have leisure? Mm-hmm. And you said before we started recording, we sort of talked through kind of how we want to. You had talked about kind of three
categories of people
who
can't really enjoy leisure.
This is fascinating. Okay, so
this is totally Joseph Pieper. If you've never heard of the name of Joseph Pieper, he was a German philosopher who was a young newlywed in his 20s when the Nazis took over Germany, and so his life became, in many ways, one of responding philosophically to the thinking ideas, errors of this materialistic regime that was moving into Germany and taking over, and taking words like love and honor and courage and rewriting them and redefining them in terms of their materialistic mentality. And so in his book on leisure, he says there are three types of people who can't really enter into leisure, don't have an idea of leisure, and can't really get into it. The first type of people, he says, are basically living hand to mouth, who are so poor that they have to work to survive, that they're, kind of like, digging up roots and hunting and different things in order to try to put food on the table, because there's no break because they're constantly under the pressure of where is the next meal coming from. The second type person is a person who could, potentially, stop and have leisure, but is living within the context of a totalitarian regime that won't allow it.
And so Pieper knew that well.
Pieper experienced that well. And as well as Pope John Paul II, who wrote Dies Domini, as we were talking about last week, about the Day of the Lord. John Paul II lived first under Nazi oppression and then under communist oppression in Poland. And it was everything that they could try to do to maintain true leisure, because there's like all this effort to try to stomp out concerts and plays and all the various different cultural events and
one of the
gatherings of people.
Yes, I read. So John Paul II. Read about his life. Oh, beautiful. There's an author named George Weigel who wrote this book about St. John Paul II called Witness to Hope, and he wrote about kind of the early life. And I remember reading this. I read it when I was in seminary, and reading about one of the ways that John Paul II, as a young man, pushed back against communism was through the theater.
Right. And Polish theater wasn't just like entertainment. It's like, if you read any of John Paul II's plays, there are these very poetic, very deep thinking soliloquies and dialogues between characters that really move deeply into thought. It's really remarkable stuff.
How are we going to push back against the communists? We're going to put on a play. And you'd think like, well, that's
that encapsulates Polish culture and Catholic faith.
We're gonna. So it was, but he had to do this. It was like an underground
because it was
theater.
forbidden. It was like
Yeah.
having
They were
groups of
trying
people
to
getting
stomp
together.
out art,
Yeah.
stomp out leisure,
No assemblies of people.
stomp out any sort of creativity. And so you see that, in like architecture. I mean, I've never been to Poland. Father Carey goes to Poland all the time and talks about like the architecture of the beauty of Polish culture and the architecture, and then the stuff that they built during communism. And it's
blah.
Yeah, it's gray, it's dark,
Blocky.
it's
mechanical.
Yeah, there's sort of the idea of like the architectural style was like brutalism. I think of it, for those of you who know it, look up City Hall in Boston, Massachusetts. It's brutalist architecture. It's ugh.
Right.
It's gross, It's just this block of.
So when people are not allowed to flourish,
Yes.
they're not allowed to
Yes.
engage in any sort of activity or any sort of creativity and leisure, then you have people who are not able to have leisure. There's a government.
So that's the second group.
Keeping you from having any leisure, saying if you want to be valued in this society, you have to be at work. So get to work. Otherwise, you're valueless.
Your value is in work.
Right. Which we can come back
interestingly, so I went to a couple weeks ago. I went to Colorado for a week with some priest friends, and it was awesome. And I'm listening to this podcast. There's this podcast called The Pillar, which is sort of more of like a sort of Catholic news kind of podcast. Well, they did this little trivia thing at the end. They do these like little games, and I had never heard the state motto of Oklahoma.
Yeah. What was it?
The state motto of Oklahoma is "Work conquers all."
Labora omnia vinci. Work conquers everything.
And I was like, "Oh my gosh, what Oklahoma, really?" And it's just kind of that idea of like the sort of the Protestant work ethic, that everything can just be solved by working.
Right. You got a problem? Work at it.
Yes.
You got something you need to overcome? Work at it. You got a problem, you got something that needs to be improved inside you or in your home or in, something else. Well, get to work.
And that is not the Catholic way. Okay, so
in some sense that fits
recap.
into
The first group
that
Joseph Pieper talks about are what?
The people who live in hand to mouth, they can't have any leisure because they have to work to survive.
Second group
are people who are under a totalitarian, some regime that's keeping them, that's forcing them to work. And the third group, which is the group yet we have to discuss, is the group of people who cannot tolerate leisure because the idea that they have of leisure is so repugnant to their, people who basically been so jaded by the idea of the importance and the value of work that they don't see the value in leisure. And I think that that's the aspect that Joseph Pieper really wanted to focus on in that book. I think the primary reason he wrote it is people who don't have any leisure, not because they're not capable of it, but because they're not interiorly capable of it. They've made themselves, and I say this, like, I think this is very much endemic in our society, people who think that everything lies, that it's either laziness on or workaholism. And so either
these extremes.
Either I am hard at work, doing, being productive, or I am kicking back and relaxing, and please don't make me even get up to flip the channel like I want to have a remote.
I'm a vegetable.
And so, people on the one side look at it at the other side and say, well, I don't want that. That's no good. But it really makes me think of something that the Greek philosopher 300 years before Christ, Aristotle, one of the things he says is every virtue, and this is something that was taken up immediately by Christian thinkers and Christian philosophers and theologians like St. Thomas Aquinas, is the idea that every virtue is opposed to not just one but two vices. And it's kind of...
Say more about that. What is
like
that?
It's in the middle But it's not just in the middle between two things. So if take, for instance, courage, the virtue of courage. For the virtue of courage, we say, what is the opposite of courage? We say cowardice.
Mm-hmm.
But courage is also opposed to a rash, brash, foolhardiness, which is just running in stupidly, you know? And so it's not like courage is just in between these, and if I'm just cowardly enough and foolhardy enough, I'll be courageous. One of the things that Aristotle says in talking about courage, he says, to the cowardly man, the courageous man looks like an idiot and a fool. He's running,
Wow.
you're going to get us all killed. You're running us, like, and so to the coward, the courageous man looks like he's foolhardy. Well, to the foolhardy man, the courageous man looks like he's a coward. And he says, what are you doing? You're such a chicken. And the courageous man says, no, I just recognize that we're going to all get killed if we go in there. Yeah, you're a coward. Don't you have any guts? No, I recognize the danger of the situation. So the courageous man recognizes the danger of the situation and responds to it courageously, where the foolhardy man and the coward are kind of on these extremes. So in some sense, like if you look at any virtue, you find that it's got these two. I like to refer to it as a triangle of opposites, because it's not just that cowardice and foolhardiness are opposed to each other, but they're both opposed to the virtue which is there. And so Aristotle kind of describes this. He says that virtue, there's something that is deficiency or a lack of that virtue, which in the case of cowardice would be a lack of courage. And on the other hand, there's this excess or kind of an extremism of the virtue that misses the point of the virtue and doesn't properly, it kind of goes off on the, so it's a false and what you might call a counterfeit of that virtue. And so the foolhardy man is a counterfeit of courage, because he looks like he's really courageous, but he doesn't have any courage. He's just running blindly into the situation. So if you take that and you bring that back to what Pieper was saying about leisure, we discover that there's, again, this kind of triangle of opposites, that there's true leisure. And true leisure is not laziness on the one hand, which would just be like an excess, a deficiency of any work or any productivity, and nor is it just a workaholism. True leisure is something in and of itself that really good, and it really comes down to the question of what are things for. Do we work in order to live, or do we live in order to work?
Ooh.
Which is a very wise man mentioned that to me earlier today, and that was just the idea that some cultures are built up on this idea that we live in order to work, and we have to be involved in stuff, and we have to be doing stuff, and if we're too worn out, we need to go rest and recuperate in order to get back to work, in order to get back to accomplishing
That
things.
the sole purpose of rest and the
Is
sole purpose
recuperative.
of leisure, which isn't even leisure,
Right.
is to recuperate.
Yeah.
I thought it was interesting. This happened a couple weeks ago. We at one of our staff meetings, Jacob Farney, our children's minister, he brought up like how often, like just the language we use
Mm-hmm.
is very of human beings as being
Pretty mechanical.
we're machines.
Mm-hmm.
And so we say things like, I got to recharge my batteries.
Yeah, I got to unplug.
I got to unplug. And it was this kind of really fascinating.
We started asking, like, what other analogies do we use?
Yes.
And we kept listing off all these, I got to put the brakes on it, on this and
There
that.
were,
We gotta-
yes, keep going. There were just all these, and it really, it's like interesting how often that we talk about ourselves in that way.
Right, being cogs in a,
I have to like
I
get off the grid.
yeah,
Oh my gosh, what were the other ones? Like I'm not operating at full capacity.
right.
Those kinds of things.
We're kicking it into high
Kicking
gear.
it into high gear. I got to put that on the back burner. I need to reset.
Yes.
Um,
And this is all kind of looking at the human being like we are machines that are supposed to be really efficient and really effective at doing stuff. And our only value is in what we accomplish and what we make and what we, how many titles and how many ribbons and how many,
yeah, what has been
awards.
accomplished? Yeah.
And the awards we give,
What
we don't
have I
give people
accumulated?
awards in our society. We don't award somebody for, you have successfully rested every Sunday. we don't.
There's no award.
There's no
Yeah,
award
for that.
for someone who who goes and spends an hour gazing at a beautiful painting and just contemplating the art.
Yeah, I'm out of gas. I'm running on empty.
Oh yeah.
I put this out like on my Facebook page the other day of just like asking people for. I got to put the pedal to the metal. I need a pit stop.
Yeah.
I mean, there's just
Yeah,
it's a
for sure.
bunch. It's amazing. I gotta hit the pause button.
Yeah.
And how often we do that? I mean, I do it.
I'm feeling
all-
deflated.
Yeah. I gotta unplug, recharge. Let's reconnect. I'm running out of steam.
Yeah.
Isn't that amazing?
It's
It's
amazing.
amazing that we have this mentality that we are here for the purpose of like production.
Right. And there are, to be fair, like in this whole notion of the triangle of opposites, there are cultures which have a deficiency of, where it's like, can't you just buckle down and do what you're supposed to do?
There is a place for
can't
getting
you-
for getting stuff
Can't you
done.
be responsible? Can't you, be dependable? We need, and so there are certain cultures and certain societies that kind of get a stereotype of being so leisurely in a false, in a counterfeit sense of leisure, that they don't really have any drive to do anything.
Yeah, and that's not good.
And
That's
that's
one
not
extreme.
good. That's an
Yeah.
extreme. But we use that in a sense, I think, to justify our incapacity to have leisure on our own side because we're so focused on what doing, accomplishing, making things, earning things, winning things, that we don't say, what is it all for? What is the
Yeah,
purpose
what
of
are we doing
all of it?
here? Yeah.
Why are we even here?
And so to answer that, I mean, if you were to boil that down for somebody, like what are we doing?
What are we doing?
Why
here?
are we here?
We are here because we are good. And it is good to be here.
Oh,
It's good to
Yeah.
be, like, God is good. And I was just reading something in a little book of meditations that was kind of like something I picked up and was like, oh, this is really a treasure box of all sorts of. And one of the things he said, the author of this book he says, when we think of God's goodness, we run immediately to how good He's been to me and all the good things He's done and all the manifold graces He pours upon us. And he says, stop. I was like, what? That's what I immediately think of if I think of how good God is. It's like, you have been so good to me. You've given me all this stuff. You made me able to do this. All the good things God has done. And he says, stop, wait. The primary characteristic of being good, the primary characteristic of goodness is its goodness, is the desirability of it, is the pleasingness of it, is the wonderfulness of it, it's the fact that it is good in itself that makes something or someone good. And it's not what they do, it's not what they accomplish. God isn't good because He does a lot of good things for us. He's good because He's infinitely wonderful and infinitely magnificent, and He has every attribute of anything our hearts could desire. And so actually to realize that God himself is good is to realize that God himself is, and to spell out like what is so desirable, what is so delightful, what is so wonderful about the God that we know. And in light of that, we see our goodness as something that is a participation in his goodness, is something that's received from him in relation to him, that he says, I made you, and I said, it is good. I make the world, I say, it is good. I make, after creating all these different creatures, he makes man and woman, and he says, this is very good. And so the goodness that we have and the goodness that we are isn't just the goodness of what we've done, it's the goodness of who we are inside, and it's just the very, very being that we have. And if we never take a moment to rejoice in the goodness of God and in the goodness that he has made us to participate in, then we end up with this idea, the cultural idea we have, that goodness comes from what you've done, what you've accomplished, what grades you get, how many victories you've had.
Yeah.
And it's something that is all the result of my doing something, rather than something that I have been given because by the God who made me, because he loved me before he even made me.
So that's when we talk about the need for leisure,
right?
To stop,
is to do something,
to ponder,
to experience the
wonder,
richness,
to allow ourselves to be loved.
Right.
And that's what we're not good at.
Right. So we celebrate,
especially in the United States. Like we kind of always have to be moving. We always have to be doing. We always have to be working.
Right.
And so we never take the time to stop, to thank the Lord, to be grateful, to wonder,
to consider his goodness, to consider the goodness he wants us to have in relationship to him. And I think one of the things Pieper mentions in this book on leisure, he says that there is a distinction between servile labor and liberal art, in the sense of servile being servant and liberal being liberty. That servile labor is work which is serving some purpose, is serving some other purpose beyond itself. So it's stuff that has to get done, mowing the lawn so that the lawn can be, well manicured, and various different things. And so he juxtaposes that against the things which are perfected in and of themselves, the things which make us better people. The servile arts and the work that we do serves a purpose, but that purpose is to help us. And what we need as people, we need to take time away from the work to focus on being who we are. It's hard to.
Yeah. So I think that when we're talking about kind of what we're trying to do in the life of the parish to make Sundays different is to allow this time to wonder, to ponder, to receive, and not to
be loved,
to be still,
to be loved by God, to be loved by a family, to be loved by friends, and to enjoy that, and to be made perfect in it.
That it's good in and of itself.
Right.
And I think so that's hard. And so I think this is a place of conversion for myself, for Father Healey, for the life of our parish. That's not something that we're particularly good at. It's a virtue that needs to be built up.
And the best thing is God wants us to have it. So.
Yes. So that's what we're trying to do, to build this culture. All right, we'll keep this conversation going. Leisure, the basis of culture.